Welcome to the deep dive. We're here to, cut through some of that digital noise and hopefully bring you a bit more clarity. Today, we're plunging into something that really hits at a core challenge we all face. How do you know who to trust online? Especially with complex stuff, like cybersecurity. It's just this overwhelming flood, isn't it? Trying to sort out the real experts from, well, people who are just good at marketing, or maybe even spreading bad info. It can feel impossible sometimes. Our focus today is on a pretty polarizing figure in the cybersecurity world, Jonathan Scott, who goes by at Jonathan Data One online. And just to be super clear up front, because this comes up a lot. This is not the Jonathan Scott from TV, the Property Brothers guy. Okay, no home renovations here.
No,
Definitely not.
no. This Jonathan Scott, he's based in Dallas, Texas, and he presents himself as this dedicated researcher, really deep into mobile malware, spyware, digital forensics. He kind of paints himself as a truth seeker, someone digging for stuff others might be missing or hiding. Exactly. And that's what we want to unpack in this deep dive, that persona he's built. But, and this is the crucial part, we have to contrast that with, well, this really formidable, very detailed wave of criticism he gets from the wider security community. A lot of top experts, people really respected in the field, they openly call his work things like calculated disinformation. Some even say pseudoscience.
It's pseudoscience.
Wow.
Yeah.
So there's this huge gap, it's actually quite alarming, between how he presents himself, this truth teller, and how many of his peers see him. It's a real split.
It really is. A fascinating gap, maybe alarming is the right word. And we need to dissect that. And for you, listening in, this isn't just about one person's story, though it is compelling. Think of it more like a case study. It's essential, really, for learning how to evaluate sources critically, not just in cybersecurity, but anywhere. How to spot flimsy arguments, logical fallacies, how to navigate this incredibly complex and sometimes really deceptive online world. It's about finding those actual nuggets of knowledge, even when there's so much noise, right? And sometimes that noise is intentional. We want to give you some tools for that. Okay, so let's unpack this whole thing. Where should we start? Maybe with the foundation of his public image, the persona he projects. Because that's where some of the first big questions start popping up, right? Especially in a field like this, credibility often rests on, solid academic or professional ground. So first up, Jonathan Scott publicly states he's a PhD student in computer science at a place called North Central University. Now, on the surface, okay, that sounds pretty serious. A PhD in comp sci, that's a tough field. It suggests a certain level of, authority.
Right. On the surface, absolutely. Yep. Pursuing a PhD in computer science signals, a deep dive into research, aiming for a high level of expertise.
Yeah.
It definitely lends weight. But this is actually where we see some of the first, let's say, significant cracks appearing in that persona he's built. Reports started surfacing that he was actually let go from that very PhD program.
Let you go, not just dropped out.
Oh, let go. And apparently it wasn't for academic reasons like struggling with the work. It was reportedly due to code of conduct violation.
Code of conduct. Okay, that's different.
They're very different. It's not a minor thing. That immediately throws up a pretty big red flag about, well, professional conduct, academic integrity. Those are absolutely fundamental in research, right?
Yep.
Especially if you're positioning yourself as a truth seeker. Code of conduct issues in academia, they can cover a lot. Plagiarism, research misconduct, maybe unethical behavior, misuse of university resources, getting removed from a PhD program for that. It's a serious mark against someone's record. Honesty, integrity, they're paramount. And then, beyond just those allegations, critics started pointing out some other details about the program itself at North Central University. Now look, online education is absolutely legitimate, lots of great programs out there. But this specific PhD program, the fact that for some students it apparently starts every Monday, well, that raised some eyebrows.
Starts every Monday, a PhD program.
Yeah. That detail, for some critics, brought up questions about maybe the rigor, the structure, compared to more traditional PhD programs. The ones with fixed start dates, cohorts of students moving together, intense research seminars, qualifying exams, that whole long dissertation process with close supervision, often involving being embedded in a lab.
Right, very structured.
Very. So a program with rolling weekly enrollment for a PhD, it just invites scrutiny, questions about the depth of research training, the faculty mentorship, the overall academic standards, especially when you compare it to top-tier computer science research universities.
It's interesting because those academic claims, they really are often the bedrock. Someone says PhD student, you instantly think, okay, rigorous methods, peer review, honesty. So when that foundation starts to look a bit shaky or the context around it gets questioned, What does that signal to you as an expert looking at this? Does it immediately make you dismiss everything else?
Well, it's not necessarily an immediate dismissal of everything, but it's illuminating, isn't it? How quickly that foundational claim can start to, well, unravel a bit under scrutiny.
Mm.
And it matters so much for someone framing themselves as a truth seeker. These details, the code of conduct allegations, the online-only nature, that continuous enrollment thing, they definitely start to chip away at the perceived academic authority. In a critical technical community, people notice these things. They ask questions about the foundations of someone's claimed expertise, their adherence to research norms, their ethical framework.
Right.
It's not just about the letters after your name. It's about the whole process, the standards. So for you listening, a key takeaway here is maybe always look beyond just the title. Dig into the context a bit. What kind of program is it? What are the norms for that degree? Are there any, reported issues around the person's conduct in that setting? Those questions help gauge the real weight behind the claim. Hashtag 1.2. Gaming the system, the HackerOne ranking.
Okay, so the academic side has these questions hanging over it. But it wasn't just academic claims, was it? He also made this big splash, asserting he was the, quote, #1 security researcher in the United States, and #4 globally in Q3 2021 on HackerOne. Now, HackerOne, for those who don't know, it's a huge deal in the bug bounty world. It's one of the top platforms. So claiming that rank, that's a massive statement, suggests top-tier skill, finding really critical stuff.
It's a very significant claim, yes. That kind of rank implies elite status in the bug bounty community. But this is another area where the expert community went, hold on a second. Many security pros suggested this was actually a strategy. They called it reputation hacking.
Reputation hacking. What does that mean exactly?
It basically means intentionally manipulating metrics or systems, often using superficial methods, to make yourself look way more accomplished than your actual high-quality contributions would justify. It's like optimizing your score on the leaderboard, rather than optimizing for finding really serious security flaws.
Okay, gaming the system.
Pretty much. In Scott's specific case, the allegation is he achieved this high rank by essentially flooding a Department of Defense, a DoD bug bounty program. Flooding it with just a massive volume of low-severity reports.
Low severity, meaning?
Meaning minor issues, things that aren't critical threats. Think configuration errors, really common flaws, the kind of stuff that, honestly, automated scanning tools often pick up. So instead of spending, say, months finding one really complex critical vulnerability that could take down a whole system, he allegedly focused on quantity, pumping out hundreds of these minor reports. Each one might give you a few points, maybe, but the individual impact is tiny. It was a volume play.
So it boosts the numbers, boosts the rank, but doesn't necessarily reflect finding truly important vulnerabilities.
Exactly. And the core bug bounty community, the people who really value finding those novel, complex, high-impact bugs that take serious skill and time, they generally don't respect that approach. They see it as, well, kind of cheapening the whole thing, diluting the meaning of the leaderboards. It's prioritizing personal ranking over genuinely improving security. And what's more, people looked into it. And apparently the available public leaderboards from that time, they don't seem to consistently back up his specific claim of being #1 US, #4 global in that exact quarter, which just adds another layer of skepticism.
Okay, so this gets really interesting then. It's not just that he found bugs, but how he apparently got that ranking, this reputation hacking. It seems to reveal something about priorities, doesn't it? How does someone listening trying to learn tell the difference between real achievement and just like manipulating the stats?
Yeah, and zooming out a bit, it really shows how metrics on their own can be super misleading if you don't understand the context, right? Gaming systems like that, systems designed to reward genuine effort, it just undermines trust. Trust in the leaderboards, trust in the claims. You get this false impression of expertise. Because the real value, certainly in security research, it's almost always in the depth and the criticality of the findings. Those really tough vulnerabilities that need serious skill, creative thinking, that's worlds apart from just churning out volume on minor stuff.
Right.
So for you, the listener, a key insight maybe is when you see these online claims, these rankings, always ask not just what was achieved, but how. Was it through deep, complex work? Or was it tactics focused on volume or gaming the system? Were they specific, verifiable, high-impact findings or just big, vague numbers? Making that distinction helps you separate real expertise from just clever metric manipulation. It forces you to look past the flashy number and ask, okay, but what does that number actually mean in terms of real skill or value?
Okay, but as we sort of hinted at before, this isn't a completely clear-cut picture. It's not all just questionable claims in gaming systems. And this is where the story gets, well, paradoxical, I guess, more complex. Because amidst all this controversy, Jonathan Scott does have some actual verifiable technical wins. So what do we make of that? How does that fit in? Especially for you as a learner trying to make sense of these conflicting signals. Hashtag TAC 2.1 verifiable technical wins.
Yeah, exactly. Despite the questions around his PhD status and the HackerOne ranking, he does have these concrete technical achievements, things you can point to that aren't easily dismissed. For example, he was legitimately assigned CVE 2022-728.
Okay, remind us what a CVE is again?
Sure, a CVE, common vulnerabilities and exposures, it's like a standard identifier. A public record for a specific cybersecurity vulnerability that's been discovered and documented. It's managed by MITRE, a nonprofit.
Hmm.
Getting a CDE assigned means you found a real, recognized vulnerability. This specific one, CDE 2022-728, was for a medium severity issue found in LG phones.
Medium severity. Okay, so not minor, not critical, but real.
Real, tangible. It takes genuine skill to find, analyze, and report something like that properly. You can't just fake a CVE assignment. It's an official acknowledgement of a discovery.
Got it.
And then there's Apple.
Yeah.
Apple, notoriously rigorous about security, and they don't often publicly thank external researchers unless it's something significant. But Apple publicly thanked him for help with a security issue in Apple Credential Manager.
Apple thanked him.
Publicly acknowledged his help. That's a big deal.
Yeah.
For a company like Apple to do that, it signals a genuine, valuable contribution to their security. So these aren't small things. They are concrete, public, validated instances showing he does possess real technical skill. He can identify actual security flaws in complex systems.
Right. You can't really argue with a CVE assignment or a public thank you from Apple. That's tangible evidence of skill, which then makes you circle back and wonder, how does someone with that kind of demonstrable ability also get involved in, the reputation hacking stuff or have those academic questions? It's confusing.
It is confusing, and that's the crux of it. These contributions do lend him real, undeniable credibility as a security researcher, at least in terms of technical chops. It's not easily faked or gamed. It shows he understands vulnerabilities. And that's where the tension really comes into focus. It's not just smoke and mirrors. There's some verifiable technical substance there, which forces us, I think, to look at the whole picture with more nuance than just a simple good or bad label. Hashtag tag 212.2. Why this nuance matters.
Exactly. These verifiable wins, they make the whole discussion way more complex, don't they? He's clearly not, just some charlatan with zero skills making everything up. He can do technical work, which means you can't just dismiss him entirely. It forces a more careful assessment.
And that raises a really important question, especially for you listening. How do we square that? How do you reconcile genuine technical skill with what looks like a pattern of questionable self-promotion, maybe misleading claims, ethical concerns?
It's the key challenge, right? Especially in fields like cyber, where technical skill is so highly prized.
Yeah. This duality, it has a powerful psychological effect. It makes it harder for people to just write him off completely, because he does have these points of credit, undeniable points. So it forces us to think, okay, someone can have real skills, but still engage in activities that draw heavy criticism from peers.
Right. Competence in one area doesn't automatically mean integrity in all areas.
Precisely. And that's a crucial lesson in critical thinking. Recognizing that skill doesn't always equal credibility or ethical behavior, especially in how someone presents themselves or their findings. It requires a deeper look at their methods, their claims, and maybe even their motivations, beyond just whether they can find a bug.
Okay, so now we get to what is probably the biggest flashpoint, the most public, the most controversial part of his work. His efforts, really aggressive efforts, to debunk the major investigations into Pegasus spyware.
Yes.
Pegasus. This is where he goes head-to-head with some of the most respected names in the entire field. And it's where the cybersecurity community's pushback against him becomes really intense, almost unanimous. Hashtag tag 3.1. The core argument against esteemed researchers.
Yeah, his main public focus for quite a while became trying to debunk, that was his word, the big investigations into Pegasus.
Yeah.
And we need to be clear who he was taking on here. These investigations were done by groups like Citizen Lab and Amnesty International.
Okay, and these aren't small players.
Not at all. Citizen Lab out of the University of Toronto, world-renowned. They do incredible interdisciplinary work on tech, human rights, security. They've consistently exposed state-sponsored hacking using meticulous, peer-reviewed forensic work. And Amnesty International, global human rights organization. decades of rigorous independent investigations into abuses, including misuse of surveillance tech.
So major, credible organizations with long track records.
Exactly. Their work is taken incredibly seriously by governments, by the UN, by the whole security community.
And Scott's core argument against them was
What?
that they just got it wrong. He basically said their forensic methods were flawed. That was his main line. He talked a lot about a lack of transparency in how they did their work, and he claimed their indicators of compromise, their IOC.
Right, the digital fingerprints.
Yeah, those digital fingerprints that malware like Pegasus supposedly leaves behind, he asserted those were unreliable. He was essentially questioning the core evidence.
And to try and prove this point, he described this experiment he wanted to do, or maybe did, where volunteers would supposedly plant fake IOCs on their phones.
Plant fake evidence. Why?
Well, the idea, his implication was this. If you could manually put those Pegasus fingerprints on a phone, and then a forensic tool found them, then, he argued, that proves that the real reported infections found by Citizen Lab and Amnesty could also be faked, or at least that their IOC evidence wasn't reliable proof of a genuine infection.
Okay, so he's trying to cast doubt on the fundamental way these groups prove someone was hacked with Pegasus.
That was the goal, to undermine the validity of their forensic evidence by suggesting it could be easily fabricated or misinterpreted.
Wow. I mean, challenging organizations like Citizen Lab and Amnesty on their core methodology, that's incredibly bold. If he was right, the implications would be massive, wouldn't they? It would undermine years of critical work on state hacking impact victims.
Monumental implications. It would throw into question countless reports, testimonies, policy discussions based on their findings. It's not just a small technical quibble. It's a direct challenge to the foundations of some of the most important research in this space. Hashtag 3.2. The flaws in the debunking expert rebuttals.
Right. And given how serious those claims were and the reputations of Citizen Lab and Amnesty, the reaction from the broader cybersecurity community was swift and overwhelmingly negative. His work wasn't treated as like a valid scientific critique. It was widely called a disinformation campaign. People use the word pseudoscience.
Again with pseudoscience.
Yeah, it wasn't just disagreement. It was a rejection based on what experts saw as fundamental errors in his logic and his methodology. They didn't just say you're wrong. They explained why he was wrong very publicly.
Okay, can you give us an example? You mentioned he disputed their ability to locate Pegasus operators. He argued, that you can't reliably map an IP address to a country. Yes, that was one of his key technical arguments against Citizen Lab's work. And on the surface, the internet is complex, IP addresses change. Maybe that sounds plausible to someone not deep in networking.
Maybe.
But experts immediately flagged that as severe logical error. It showed, they argued, a misunderstanding of basic network forensics. He seemed to be confusing two very different things.
Yeah.
Thing one, mapping an IP address to a specific person at a specific moment. That is really hard because of dynamic IPs, shared IPs through NAT, VPNs, all that.
Okay.
Thing two, mapping an IP address to its autonomous system, or AS. An AS is basically a big block of the internet controlled by one entity, like a major ISP, Comcast, Verizon, BT, or a huge tech company.
Like a digital neighborhood almost.
Sort of, yeah. Think of it like a country's postal code system. You might not know exactly who lives at 123 Main Street just from knowing the zip code is 97210, but you know damn well that house is in Beverly Hills, California.
Right, got it.
Same idea. Mapping an IP to its AS reliably tells you the network operator, and usually the geographic region, often the country, where that ISP operates. Even if the specific user changes constantly, Citizen Lab, like basically everyone doing this kind of work, uses AS mapping for geographic attribution. It's standard practice. Scott's argument just fundamentally misrepresented how this works, conflating identifying a person with identifying a network's location.
Okay, so that argument didn't hold water with the experts. What about the other big thing, that experiment with planting fake IOCs? That got a lot of criticism too, right? People seemed almost baffled by it.
Oh, absolutely. That experiment was widely described as tautological.
Tautological, meaning?
Meaning it's circular reasoning.
Yeah.
It basically proves something by assuming the thing it's trying to prove. Or it proves something completely obvious and irrelevant.
Like saying it's wet because there's water on it.
Exactly. Or like my earlier example, all married bachelors are male. True, but tells you nothing new because bachelor means unmarried male. Scott's experiment fell right into that trap. Think about it. If you design a tool, specifically defined artifact X,
Okay.
and then you deliberately plant artifact X on a device.
The tool is going to find artifact X.
Of course it is. It's inevitable. The experiment proves the tool works on planted data. Great. but it says absolutely nothing about whether the real-world infections found by Citizen Lab or Amnesty using their methods on phones they didn't tamper with are legitimate or faked.
Right, it doesn't disprove their findings at all.
Not even slightly. It's a fundamental misrepresentation of how you'd scientifically validate or invalidate forensic findings. It's like planting fingerprints at a crime scene and saying, see, the fingerprint kit found them, therefore maybe the original fingerprints weren't real either. It's just illogical.
Wow. Okay, so that's not just a minor mistake. That's like misunderstanding the scientific method itself, isn't it? If you're connecting this to the bigger picture.
Precisely. It's a significant methodological flaw. It undermines the entire premise of his debunking experiment. And for you, the listener, this is such a critical lesson in spotting faulty logic. When someone presents something as proof, especially scientific proof, but it relies on circular reasoning or misrepresents basic principles of evidence, that's a massive red flag. Real science tests hypotheses against the unknown. It observes reality. It doesn't just stage a demonstration to confirm a pre-existing belief or to deliberately mislead. It's a crucial difference. Hashtag tag 3.3. The communication style ad hominem and technobabble.
Okay, so the technical arguments had these major flaws pointed out, but critics also focused on how he argued, right? His communication style, which, as we know, can be just as effective or damaging as the arguments themselves.
Absolutely. Communication style is huge. And critics observed that when faced with counter-arguments or detailed technical rebuttals, Scott allegedly often resorted to ad hominem attacks.
Ad hominem attacking the person, not the argument.
Yeah. Exactly. Classic stuff. Instead of engaging with the substance of the criticism, the logical flaws, the methodological issues, the response would often be to attack the critic personally, questioning their motives, their intelligence, their affiliations, whatever. It's a way to distract, to shift the focus away from the actual technical debate and try to discredit the messenger, hoping the message gets ignored too.
Right, muddy the waters.
And alongside that, his arguments frequently contained a lot of what people called technobabble.
Technobabble, like just jargon.
Sort of, but more than that, it's language that sounds really complex, really sophisticated. It's often filled with technical terms, maybe obscure acronyms. But when you actually scrutinize it, when experts in that specific area really dig in, it often lacks real technical substance. There's no rigorous analysis underneath, no solid evidence, no sound logic connecting the terms.
So it's like a smokescreen of complexity.
Exactly. It creates this illusion of deep expertise. It can overwhelm or confuse people who aren't specialists, making it hard for them to challenge it. Even other experts, if it's outside their niche, might hesitate. It's an intimidation tactic, intentional or not.
That combination, personal attacks and this dense, maybe hollow technobabble, it sounds like a pretty potent mix for confusing people, doesn't it? Makes it really hard for a non-expert or even someone just outside that specific subfield to figure out what's real and what's just rhetoric. That wall of jargon and aggression can make you doubt things you thought were solid.
It really can. And it raises that important question for you listening. How do you spot these strategies? How do you separate them from a genuine, good faith technical debate? Well, relying on personal attacks is almost always a red flag, and using overly complex, opaque jargon when simpler explanations exist can be too. Often it's a sign that the actual evidence-based arguments are weak.
Real experts can usually explain things clearly, right?
Generally, yes. They can make complex ideas accessible without losing the core meaning. They engage with the arguments, not the person. When you see that shift towards personal attacks, towards deliberate obscurity, that's your cue to be extra critical. Ask harder questions about the actual substance, or lack thereof. It's often masking something.
Okay, so we've looked at the persona, the real skills mixed with questionable claims, and these huge controversies, especially around Pegasus. Let's zoom out now. What might be the strategy here? Is there a pattern? And maybe more importantly, what are the real-world consequences when these kinds of disputed claims actually gain traction despite expert skepticism? Hashtag 4.1, the contrarian pivot theory.
Well, analysts and observers watching this unfold, they've suggested there might be a deliberate strategy at play. Not just random actions, but a calculated approach. One theory is that maybe he initially felt ignored or perhaps overlooked by the established cybersecurity community.
Oh, he wasn't getting the recognition he felt he deserved.
Possibly. It's a competitive field, right? Full of brilliant people. Standing out through the traditional routes, meticulous research, peer-reviewed papers, major bug bounty wins. That's hard. It takes time, effort, maybe luck. So the theory goes, Maybe that feeling led to what's been called a contrarian pivot,
A contrarian pivot, meaning
meaning instead of sticking to the conventional path, he shifted strategy, adopted more of a populist marketing strategy, started trying to build his brand by going against the grain,
Right.
positioning himself as the outsider, the rebel, the anti-expert expert.
the one brave enough to challenge the establishment.
Exactly. Claiming to reveal truths the mainstream experts are missing or misunderstanding or maybe even covering up.
Yeah.
That narrative can be really appealing to certain audiences, especially those already distrustful of institutions or experts.
Yeah, that lone voice of truth trope is powerful.
Very. And his tactics, they've even been compared to figures like, say, Alex Jones,
Yeah.
where the dynamic becomes. Any angry pushback from the experts, any attempt to correct the record, it just fuels the fire. It gives him more attention, more visibility. The controversy itself becomes the marketing tool.
The outrage generates clicks, generates notoriety, doesn't matter if the claims are right or wrong.
Pretty much. And what's fascinating, or maybe disturbing, is how our current attention economy can sometimes reward that. Reward notoriety, loudness, controversy, sometimes more than it rewards quiet, careful, nuanced truth. This contrarian pivot idea, it highlights a really concerning aspect of the digital age. The incentives aren't always aligned with intellectual honesty or scientific rigor. It becomes less about contributing positively to the field and maybe more about capturing the spotlight, even if it's a negative spotlight built on friction and conflict. The risk, of course, is huge damage to the quality of public information. Hashtag tag 4.2. The NSO group connection. A complicating factor.
Okay, but then there's another layer here, something that makes it even more complicated and potentially concerning. It involves NSO Group itself, the makers of Pegasus spyware.
Ah, yes. This is a significant point.
Apparently, a sales executive from NSO Group, the company whose products investigations Scott was trying so hard to debunk, that executive publicly praised Scott, called his work, quote, genuine, independent, and bold perspective.
Yeah, that happened. A public endorsement.
From the company that makes the spyware he's defending against investigators.
Exactly. And as you can imagine, that connection, it certainly raises eyebrows, to put it mildly, for many observers, especially in the security and human rights circles.
You'd think.
I mean, getting public praise from the very company whose controversial product is under intense global scrutiny for its role in human rights abuses. When your work happens to align perfectly with discrediting the investigations into that product, it naturally, and I think legitimately, leads to serious questions. Questions about Scott's motivations, questions about his independence, questions about the objectivity of his whole debunking effort.
It suggests a potential conflict of interest, at the very least.
At the very least. It adds this significant layer of ethical complexity. When the subject of the investigations you're trying to tear down turns around and applauds your independent perspective, it makes people wonder just how independent that perspective really is.
Yeah.
It casts a pretty big shadow, suggesting maybe an alignment of interests, or at least a very convenient overlap between his claims and NSO's goals. So for you listening, it's always crucial, isn't it? Consider the source of praise, especially when it comes from someone who clearly benefits from the message being spread. Hashtag tag 4.3. Real-world consequences, the Polish Senate hearing.
So, okay, we have the academic questions, the reputation hacking claims, the flawed Pegasus debunking, the NSO connection, a lot of criticism from experts. But despite all that being allegedly kicked out of his PhD program, reportedly banned from bug bounty platforms, did his claims just stay online? Or did they actually have an impact in the real world?
And this is the really critical and frankly sobering part of the story. No, they didn't just stay online. This is where the digital narrative jumped into tangible, real-world consequences. His debunk claims, the very ones widely rejected by experts for those fundamental flaws we discussed, they were actually cited in a Polish Senate committee hearing.
A Senate hearing in Poland about Pegasus.
Yes, a hearing specifically about the use of Pegasus spyware in Poland. A high-level governmental discussion in a democratic country, potentially influencing national policy, security decisions, human rights considerations.
And they cited his work, the stuff experts called pseudoscience.
They cited his claims. And this, right here, highlights what observers called a dangerous disconnect. You have information that is widely considered pseudoscience by the expert community, stuff easily taken apart by those who understand the tech. Yet it somehow managed to influence a high-level governmental discussion.
Wow, that's deeply concerning.
It really is. It shows how easily discredited information can actually undermine legitimate, painstaking research. Years of careful ethical work by groups like Citizen Lab can be damaged, and worse, potentially, it could even endanger the people that research is trying to protect.
Oh, so.
Well, think about activists, journalists, opposition politicians who might be targeted by state surveillance using tools like Pegasus. If the evidence proving they were targeted gets dismissed in official channels because someone cited faulty pseudoscientific debunking claims.
Then their safety, their rights, their ability to seek justice is directly threatened.
Exactly. Their very real danger gets downplayed or ignored based on misinformation that gained undeserved traction.
Man, that really brings home the gravity, doesn't it? This isn't just Twitter spats or academic debates. It affects policy, security, people's lives. When info that experts easily dismiss manages to filter up to that level of decision-making, the potential for harm is huge. It feels like a real vulnerability in how we process information now.
It really does. And zooming out one last time, the big picture here is stark. It highlights the fragility of truth, maybe, in this age of just overwhelming information, and why critical thinking, critical engagement is more vital than ever. It shows how these online narratives, even ones built on really shaky ground, can achieve surprising influence. They can have profound real-world impacts, challenging informed decision-making, challenging democratic processes.
Yeah.
This whole story, it's the ultimate so what moment for you as a learner, isn't it? It shows how a mix of maybe some tech skill plus serious social media savvy plus taking that contrarian stance, how that combo can be used, maybe even weaponized, to undermine vital research with potentially devastating consequences. It really underscores our collective responsibility, I think, to demand credible sources and rigorous evidence, especially when powerful interests might be involved. Hashtag outro.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, we're kind of left with this central paradox, aren't we, Jonathan Scott? This really strange, unsettling mix. You've got verifiable technical skill on one hand, publicly acknowledged contributions, but then alongside that, this public persona built on claims that just seem to fall apart when experts really look closely.
Yeah, it's a potent case study, a really challenging figure to just neatly categorize. And it shows, doesn't it, how someone can maybe leverage even, let's say, modest technical knowledge, but combine it with real social media skill, a knack for marketing, and that strategic contrarian position, and gain significant influence.
Even if that influence comes from challenging the expert consensus.
Often by challenging the consensus,
Yeah.
by tapping into that broader cultural skepticism, which is very powerful online today. We see similar patterns in other complex areas too, unfortunately. Climate change, public health.
Yeah. It really leaves you wondering, though, in this environment we're all swimming in, what happens when just being notorious, being loud, being the one constantly challenging the experts? What happens when that becomes more powerful, gets more attention than careful, peer-reviewed, verifiable truth? When the performance of expertise starts to overshadow actual expertise, what does that do to our ability, collectively, to make sense of the world and make good decisions?
And where does that leave the fight for integrity, for truth in critical fields like security research? Especially when the stakes are so high, state surveillance, human rights, protecting vulnerable people. It's a question that needs constant reflection, constant vigilance from all of us interacting with information online, from casual readers right up to policymakers. It really underlines why we need that independent, verifiable expertise more than ever.
Absolutely. So our advice, as always, keep seeking out different perspectives. Question what you encounter online. Apply that critical thinking rigorously, especially in these complex areas where the truth seekers, well, they might not always be what they appear to be. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into a really complicated aspect of online credibility.